All right, I believe it's time to get started. It is 4 p.m. here in Stockholm. I believe we have people from all over the world joining, and it's time to get going. Super excited to be here today, and it's very exciting to see all of these different roles popping up. But by far the most prominent roles that we have here, or prominently standing out roles, is the lecturer, professor, and trainer. So super exciting to see such a breadth of roles here today. Lovely. To kick it off, today's host will be Julia, aka me. So if you've been in any of these before, you recognize my face for sure. We also have Lasse from the Mentimeter team joining us here today. Lasse, or Lasse as one would say in Swedish, he will participate and present certain aspects of the presentation today. In order to participate, if you haven't already, please pick up your phone and scan the QR code that you see in the upper right corner here on your screen. Or if you want to use another device than your phone, you can always go to menti.com and just type in the code that you see here on the top. I believe Ostra, who is supporting here from our side as well, has put the link in the chat too. So there are multiple ways that you can join here today and start voting. So you will be my students today, and you will get to interact with me with asking questions, following or filling in a few answers to different questions and so forth. So we will live as we learn and be very interactive today. And you can ask questions all through the session. Just press open Q&A once you have signed in to whatever device that you are using. And there you can type in your question, and it's going to be popping up at the bottom right corner here for me. And I will try to take questions continuously. And we also have a few pit stops along the way for you to ask questions to either me or to Lasse. And I have Ostra moderating the questions today. So in case you don't see your questions right away, don't be scared, don't be stressed. It will most probably pop up in a few seconds. The main reason for us moderating is to make sure we don't have duplicate questions and so forth. I'm trusting you to be nice and kind here with your questions today as well. And don't worry about print screening the slides or being stressed about trying to remember everything, because you will receive both the recording and all of the slides after this session. So no need to worry about that. All right, I think we can get going properly. So today we will start off with why accessibility and inclusivity. Why is it important, and some different reasons around that. There is, of course, a wide array of different reasons for it, but we have picked a few that we find to be important from our end, and feel free to bring in your insights later on. We have a bit of a slot for that as well. Then I will bring in Lasse from our design system team here at Mentimeter, who works specifically with the accessibility aspect at Mentimeter. He's going to talk about Mentimeter's approach to accessibility specifically. And after that, I will dive into some different use cases and inspiration. So more hands-on use cases that you can go to increase inclusiveness in general. So if you've been in any of my sessions before, it's different Mentimeter question types that you can copy and get going with straight off. So hopefully you will get some inspiration there as well. And as mentioned, Q&A is going to be all through the session, so please feel free to bring all the questions you may have around accessibility and inclusivity. Perhaps you've been saving it up for some while, and this is the time to go. We love questions, so please have them coming. All right. But we want to get started with why accessibility and inclusivity from a higher educational perspective, of course. First and foremost, having a more accessible and inclusive environment. Sorry, it's the afternoon here in Sweden, so sometimes my English may be stumbling a little bit. It can lead to improved learning outcomes. Inclusive environments enables a broader input, which in turn leads to better decisions and outcomes. So there are multiple research that point to the fact that the more insight that you get in from an audience, especially diverse insights, leads to both better decisions, better reflections, and in turn better outcomes. So having the possibility of getting all of the voices in a room gathered together is really, really powerful to improve learning outcomes and just any outcomes in general. Of course, accessibility and inclusivity is also from the perspective of preparing students for a diverse world. It really equips the students to thrive in diverse workplaces and communities. Of course, they are in already, hopefully, a diverse environment at their university, but even if they're not, once they get out into the real world, it is going to be diverse, and there's going to be a lot of different people and different experiences for them. So already preparing them for that now makes them more set for the real world once they graduate from the university. It can also help with driving innovation. So designing for accessibility can lead to more creative solutions that often benefit everyone, which is a very important aspect as well. And of course, except for the fact that we should all hopefully care for accessibility and inclusivity, there also is, of course, laws and regulation as well that we need to take care of. So regulations are, luckily enough, increasingly promoting equity and accessibility worldwide, and that is also something that we need to take into consideration. But I would love to hear from you. What is one reason accessibility and inclusivity are important in your role or context? And I'm going to bring up the QR code. Sorry if it hides the text a little bit more, but if someone joined late, then they can always pick up their phone and scan the QR code here to the right. I will bring it down in just a second. Provide inclusive learning environment, ensure relevance and impact, neurodiverse learners. Oops, I'm going to bring the QR code back down a little bit. Everyone should have the access to learn in a way that suits their needs, making sure the library and materials are accessible to all, a lot of good things here. And of course, as mentioned before, you will get all these slides afterwards if you're curious to deep dive into them. I want all students to feel welcome and able to learn, give parity of experience, access and equity, because you are neurodiverse. I love that. Be a role model for teachers to show how it's done. Love that too. The student body is increasingly diverse. A lot of really good things here. It's hard to get an overview, so I'm going to use Mentimeter to try and get a bit of a summary of all of the answers that I've gotten in so far. I'm going to wait just a few more seconds for everyone to get the chance to put in their aspect. All right, so this is a little bit of a super skill in Mentimeter. Here at the bottom left corner, I'm gonna summarize it with AI and see whatever the summary is from all of these great answers. So from your perspective, we have diverse learning needs. It provides equal learning opportunities and inclusive learning environment, and of course, providing access for our students and to support diverse student body or bodies. Very, very nice. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'll remove the QR code here as well. All right, I will hand over to Lasse to talk a little bit more about Mentimeter's approach to accessibility.
Yes, thank you. There was a little bit of echo, and I'm wondering if you can hear me better now.
We can hear you fine.
Are we good to go?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. No, but just to be clear, we see accessibility in a broader term. I would say we see it more from an inclusive design perspective, which means we need to create a product that is accessible and usable by people of all abilities, backgrounds, and context. And often when we talk about accessibility, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines is the main focus. Of course, WCAG is an important part of accessibility, as well as being able to use Mentimeter with assistant technology like a screen reader, or if you need to navigate with a keyboard. But with that said, we think that accessibility is so much more than just being WCAG compliant. And our approach to accessibility is to ensure a seamless and inclusive experience for all users. This means that we mainly focus on 3 different areas to improve our product. The first one is user impact, which means focusing on issues that improves the user experience, and especially for users with disabilities. The second one is compliance. And with compliance, we mean that we aim to follow and be compliant to the WCAG 2.2 Level A guidelines. And the third one is client feedback. And that's manage and take care of all the feedback from our clients and users from real-world cases. And if we dive deeper a little bit into user impact, we believe that through regular user testing, we enhance our service to ensure better accessibility. And we conduct a lot of user tests, and our user research team does a fantastic job of analyze how Menti works for our users. But we think it's also valuable to also provide usability testing with people with disabilities, because we get even more information and insights on what we need to improve and what works well when we comes to Mentimeter. Mentimeter's commitment to WCAG 2.2 compliance help us meet accessibility standards required by laws and regulations that was meant before, but it's also, of course, a demand from our clients. They want to procure a product that's accessible. So twice per year, we do an accessibility audit on menti.com, where we test our product against the WCAG guidelines. And the fact that we choose to test against WCAG 2.2 is because we follow our clients' requirements. And for example, the public sector in the United Kingdom has these requirements for a few months now. If you're interested in our current status around accessibility, I would like you to go to mentimeter.com/accessibility, where you also will find our voluntary product accessibility template. Please feel free to read more how we work with accessibility and our status right now. Listening to our clients and user community helps us address practical real-world needs. I'm love to get feedback from our users and clients, and especially, of course, when it comes to accessibility-related issues. I think it's a luxury to receive information about how our product is used and perceived, what possible challenges it may be, and to receive suggestion for improvements is very, very valuable for us. So I invite you all to get in touch with us if you have any questions, thoughts, or opinions on how we could do Menti better from an accessibility perspective. To present with accessibility and inclusion in mind can feel like a difficult task sometimes. For example, I feel a little bit nervous today when I have this presentation in English, since it's not my first language. I would probably make a better and more inclusive presentation if it was held in Swedish, but I'm trying my best. Or if we take the GIF image that I have chosen to add to this slide, is that right from an accessibility and inclusion perspective? It may be very disturbing for someone. Yes, it's very clear that it's a little bit hysterical and can take focus from the main content, which of course is not optimal, but it can also provide joy. Or should we use a more discreet one? There's not always a straight answer on what's the right thing to do, but the more knowledge you have about your audience, the better it will be when it comes to present in an inclusive way. We believe we can help you to present with accessibility and inclusion in mind by creating an understanding of how diverse your audience can be. We have updated an article that's called Present with Accessibility Inclusion in Mind that I want you to read if you're more interested in this subject. We also have several functions in our editor that can help you as a presenter to create a more inclusive presentation. If we take the example that we see on the screen right now, where we have a text where parts of the text have very low contrast and are therefore difficult to read. If we look at this screenshot from the editor, we can see that we have changed the text color in the editor. It's a text that's marked in the middle of the screen, and you will get a warning if there are not enough contrast. The yellow symbol indicates that you see in the picture that the color of the text has a low contrast compared to the color of the background. In this case, you can of course choose to have a text that has low contrast, but we want to have these like clear warnings and help you to make a better presentation. Another example is a smart function is our accessibility check, which you can see in the picture in the presentation. You can find it at the cogwheel and upper left corner. And this feature gives you an overall accessibility score along with detailed insights on important factors like text contrast, if you have wrote an alternative text for images and other accessibility considerations. You will also receive practical recommendation to enhance each aspect, ensuring your presentation is accessible to all audience members. For example, if we have the question type pin on image, which can be really hard to answer if you're using a screen reader, you will get a notice in the accessibility check that that function is used. That was all for me right now. Please feel free to ask more questions in the Q&A, and I hand it over to Julia. You need to unmute, Julia.
I can't believe that still happens in 2024. Here we go. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Lasse. I think there may be some questions for you. The first one actually being for me. How did you create the summary of our answers? You can, if you have AI enable in your workspace or in your account, depending on how your setup looks like, you navigate down to the bottom left corner here, and you have this little symbol, actually our Mentimeter logo, in between the two arrows at the bottom left corner. And if you press that one, and if you are on an open-ended question type and you have answers in them, this is going to not be grayed out, but something that you can actually press on. And once you do that, Mentimeter does the job for you. As easy as that. So highly recommend to check that out. Let's see, can we change the slide background to pastel colors? I thought pastel was recommended for dyslexia. Maybe Lasse, you want to take this one?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there are different recommendations for people with different needs. And I would say it's not a clear recommendation what colors you should. I think what you can think in that perspective is to use a font that's easy to read, which is most cases is a very common font. I also think it's super important that you have a color scheme that's are consistent throughout the presentation, because then it will be easier to read and understand the text. But I can, of course, dig more into this. But I would say be consistent is the most important stuff in this case.
Thank you, Lasse. I think this may be for you as well. Do you have plans for more accessibility checkers in the future? For example, you currently have the color contrast check. How about adding checks for heading structure, etc.?
Oh, super interesting question. Yes, we have. We have loads of things that we want to do. We have a long backlog of improvements that we want to do. I think it could be interesting to also, for example, use AI to analyze the headings and etc., so that we can help the presenters to put the right question to the audience. So yeah, more coming, but I haven't a better example than this right now.
It's super exciting to get all the feedback. And I've actually, at the end of this session, I've also, except if you add it here, I've also added a link to a page where you can actually type in your suggestions to us. So any feedback you may have or any feature requests that you may have, I have that at the end of the session as well. A little link, so stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for that. Okay, what about the accessibility of PDF exports from Menti? Do you have plans to improve the accessibility of these documents in the future? Lasse, maybe you have an idea on this one?
We are aware that we have the PDFs that are exported from Menti is not accessible, and it's very hard to use a screen reader to get the information. We are aware of the problem. It's in our backlog, but it's hard for us right now to say like a date or a time when it will be fixed. But it's an issue we are very well informed of that we need to improve on. So thank you.
Yes, and I throw all the uncomfortable questions to Lasse, but I have heard this before as well, working with many of my university clients. We do have a few other options that are more accessible, such as sending the link to the presentation that is screen reader accessible. I understand that may not always fit all the all the needs, because the PDF is sometimes needed for different purposes. But I do want to highlight that there are other options that are more accessible that makes you still be able to actually share the slides from a Mentimeter. So just wanted to highlight that before we move on. Are these features only available in the paid version, or are some of them available in the free version? I believe that the accessibility checker is all through Mentimeter. It's not something that's paid for. Am I correct, Lasse?
Yes, you're absolutely correct.
So it's all available in the free version as well. All right, I think we already answered this one, so let me move forward. How do you get AI enabled? I've requested it a few times. That depends a little bit. So if you are on a organization, like on the workspace, so to say, of your organization, it's up to the owners of your platform or your workspace to enable it, because you do need to agree to certain sub-processor. So I would say reach out to the owners of Mentimeter within your organization, and they can hopefully help you forward with that request. Can you please show again where the accessibility checker option is? Absolutely. Let me go into the edit mode and I can show you straight off. And let's see how well we have prepared for this session if we've been accessible ourselves. So you find the accessibility checker at the upper middle left side of the screen. So this little cog here that says settings. If you press that one, you go all the way to the bottom to accessibility. So of course, if you already have issues on accessibility at certain slides, as Lasse showed, the little accessibility symbol will pop up. But to access the accessibility checker, you press here, and then you get an overall accessibility score. And it seems like we got even a little star this time. So happy to see that we are living as we learn. So if there were any issues with this presentation, they would show up here, but it seems like we are all set basically. We just have a little bit of an intention on the visualization for some backgrounds basically. But that's how you find it. I hope that helped. Let me see if I can get back to full screen. It would be great to have a slider for high contrast colors, and it displays the recommended colors. Sometimes the colors are not visible on basic templates. That's a really good feedback. Thank you so much for that. I believe it definitely highlights if the contrast is not good, but I don't think it gives you recommendations per se. The only thing that it will happen is if you increase the contrast and makes it more visible, then the checker will disappear. Anything to add on to that, Lasse, or did I cover it?
No, but I think it's both good and bad with Menti that you can actually choose your own colors. And so I would recommend a theme called Soft Shadows, which has really good, great contrast between the visualization's colors. Menti Light and Menti Dark also works well, but Soft Shadow is actually a theme that we created to have a really great contrast. So have a look at that.
Perfect. Thank you. You can find it at the right side of your presentation. You find themes, and then you can scroll down a little bit, and there you have all of the themes that Mentimeter has created, and there will be in everyone's account, whether it's free or paid or whatever it may be. All right, thank you. I think that was all the questions for now, so I will continue. Thank you, Lasse. I'm going to move more into the inclusivity part. So I'm going to show a few different slide types that you can use to create a more inclusive environment. And I will also give you a few tips and tricks. And I want to start with anonymity being key factor here. So as many of you that are listening in here may know, the anonymity is very important for creating a more inclusive environment. Because first of all, this allows the students to share their thoughts and opinions without having any fear of judgment. It also ensures that all perspectives, including those from the more quiet or less confident students or participants in general, are equally valued and heard. And finally, it creates a safe environment which supports more inclusive conversation. So it kind of links back a little bit to what I mentioned at the beginning, making sure that the more diverse inputs we have, the better conversations we can have and the better decisions we can make. So in order for that to be able to happen, we need to create a safe environment. And Mentimeter can really help with that because, as some of you may know, it is by default anonymous. So I would highly recommend to talk about that or highlight that with your students if it's the first time that they are using Mentimeter, to make sure that they know that this is anonymous and they will not get scrutinized by anything, so to say. So I can definitely highlight that before I go into the examples. I want to showcase one question type that can be quite nice for students to get an understanding of their own feelings in terms to mental health or anything like that, and to compare themselves with other students and feel like, okay, actually, maybe I am not alone here. So first and foremost, you can ask the students which year of their studies they are in. Are they in the first year, second year, third year, or anything else? And I assume that most of you here are in other, but if you want to fill in the others, that's also great for my example here. But starting off with that to see if there's any differences between different groups, because with the multiple choice question type that I have here in front of me, you can actually segment the questions together and create even deeper understanding between groups and make people feel seen and heard, whether they are first years or they are on exchange or postgraduate. So what you can do is you can just ask this question and then follow up with another multiple choice, which I have chosen for this specific example to be, what are the most common challenges that you face as a university student? And that could be balancing coursework and personal life, managing mental health and stress, staying motivated, academic results, or so forth. So here you can actually start seeing how it may or may not, that could also be the case, but how it may differ between different student groups. And this is all still completely anonymous, but it can be nice for the student to see that, okay, I am not alone in this. I can see that this is something that also third year students have, or maybe they don't have. So maybe it will be better for me once I get to that stage and so forth. But it really helps allowing and enabling the students to understand each other and in that turn feel more comfortable themselves. So we can see that, for example, the third year students feels more that the biggest challenges for them is managing mental health and stress and academics results. The second year ones is balancing coursework and personal life. And the first year ones being a little bit of a mix of everything and so forth. So this is, again, the segmentation feature in Mentimeter, which is really nice for these purposes. And also, if you as an educator or if you're supporting educators, whatever role you're in, this can also help you to understand how there may be different struggles between different students and take actions accordingly. So it can also be something that can be a support for you as a lecturer, or again, if you're supporting lecturers or educators in general, or whatever role you may be in, this could be interesting information. But again, all completely anonymous. And in order to do this, you can either do it in your own peace and quiet after a lecture, for example. You don't have to necessarily show this to the student if you don't want to, but I do think there are some value in doing so. But basically, in order to activate it, you navigate up to the left side of the screen And on the multiple choice question type, you will have the segmentation button popping up. So if I press this one, if I wouldn't have segmented it at all, it would have looked like this. So as any standard multiple choice question type. But now I do want to segment it with the previous question I asked, which was, which year of your university studies are you currently in? And when I press this button, Mentimeter does all the work for me, and I can just start analyzing the results. Very easy and neat. Another question type, which is really good for asking about opinions and getting an idea about how students feel about certain things, is the scales question type, which is my personal favorite in terms of Mentimeter question types, because it has many different layers to it. But here's an example, asking the students how often they experience the following in their learning environment. And something I want to highlight, which I usually talk about in my sessions, is the fact that you can press H on your keyboard, or you can hide it just through navigating your mouse in the bottom part of the screen and hide the responses. You can set this up beforehand as well. You can do that in the settings. But it's a very good way to make sure that other students don't get biased with one another. Because of course, you may have a lot of anonymous, it's very hard for me to say on a Thursday afternoon with not having English as my first language, but you get my point. You can have a lot of opinions or a lot of opportunity for students to express themselves anonymously. But if there is a lot of opinions that pop up on the screen that maybe differ from what certain students are thinking, even if it's anonymous, if they see on the screen that there's a lot of different perspectives that they may not necessarily agree with, it may bias them to start thinking that way. Or, oh, maybe what I'm saying is not correct, or maybe I am thinking in a different way than others. Is that good? Is it not good? So using the hide feature is actually a really, really good way to be more inclusive in general, because you collect all the answers. I can actually see here at the bottom right of my screen that I have 41 answers on this question specifically. So I can see if I have 200 people in the room, maybe I want to wait a little longer and really push the students to put in their answers before I start showing. And then I really make sure that there is no bias from the people in the room when I actually show the answers. So that's also a really neat way to use Mentimeter and make sure that everyone's opinions are really getting heard properly. So I want to just have a little bit of a second to talk about that. But as you can see, and once I start showing the results, it comes in very neatly with an overall average. I can even see the spread of the answers. I can ask out loud in the classroom, for example, why do we think we are so spread around this topic? Is there anyone that feels comfortable expressing their answer on this? Or maybe do you want to reflect on anything that you think others have asked, and so forth. So it's a really nice way also to start conversations in a safe way. So yeah, just one example of how you can use Mentimeter and this question type specifically. I think I have a few questions, so I'll bring that up. Is the hidden response feature only available on slide questions? No, it's available on all interactive Mentimeter question types. So whether you have a multiple choice, or you have an open-ended question type, or this scales question type that I have in front of me, it works on all of them. So you can, again, either set it up beforehand, or you can press H on your keyboard as in hide, or you can use the little dashboard as well. So there are multiple ways that you can either prepare or just do it in the moment as I did now. But it's available on all Mentimeter question types. Can you do segmentation with the dots visualization? Good question. I don't believe so. I think it's only working for the bar visualization, actually. How can we make Mentimeter accessible for visually impaired individuals? For example, is there a feature that allows slides and results to be converted into audio? Not as of now. We do have screen readers. Mentimeter is screen reader compatible. I'm not sure if Lasse, you want to add anything on to that specifically, or if that covers it?
Yeah, but of course we aim for that everything in a Menti should be able to perceive by a screen reader. I think it's very important also to see the responsible for the presentation itself to actually convey the information that we present on our screen. Let's say that we have a diagram with a lot of information in front of us. It's very good to describe what we have in the screen in front of us to the audience. And I think it doesn't mean it has any meaning if you're using a screen reader or if you're tired or etc. It's a lot of things that's depending that the presenter does a good job to convey the information to the audience.
Really good input. Thank you for that. When waiting for people to answer a Menti, what is the most inclusive thing to do? I usually wait quite a while to give slower people the chance to respond and be inclusive, but it can get awkward. I agree with you, and I think this is a balance work. It's always hard to wait too long and feel like you're just standing there and waiting. I usually try to. Maybe I don't live exactly as I learned today because I actually haven't checked how many we are in the session. I need to switch to another tab then. But my general ways of doing things is to see how many we are in the room and try to just sit in the awkwardness and try to push also the audience. Okay, so if I have, again, 100 people in the room, I try to say, okay, I'm not gonna show anything until I have 90 results or 80 people having responded, because that really makes people, you make sure that people feel like they have the time to put in whatever they want. And if, I think that's what I usually try to do. But, we also need to allow people to have the time to answer. So I guess it's a balance act. I don't have a correct or wrong answer, to be honest, just trying to find a way forward. Translated by moderator. Will there be an option to customize a template with the name of your organization? I'm confused. What does that mean, translated by moderator?
I translated this because someone submitted the question in Spanish.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Will there be an option to customize a template with the name of your organization? We do have customized templates. If you are on a paid version of Mentimeter, then you can add your organization's logo, for example, and the colors of your organization to automatically be applied to all of the slides. I hope that answered it. Is it possible to use icons to supplement the text and / questions? I believe you can add emojis. You can copy emojis and add them if you want to. Mentimeter supports emojis, the classic ones that we also have on our phones. So from that perspective, yes. If I import slides from PowerPoint, will they be accessible? Maybe Lasse, you can actually answer this one better than I can.
Unfortunately, I don't know. I haven't tried it, so and I haven't heard any customers ask that question. So the answer is I don't know, unfortunately.
We'll have to get back on that because I'm not entirely sure myself either. It depends. If you import slides into Mentimeter, which I guess this question is, if you import it as images, which is on the import button, they won't be accessible for a screen reader at least, because they will be imported as images. So that's the backside of doing that. But we also have a bit more of an integration. So you find it if you add a new slide and scroll all the way down, you have a PowerPoint integration, which is also linked to your web-based presentation in PowerPoint. If you do it that way, it will be accessible and not added as images. So from that perspective, yes. I'm not entirely sure how it would work with the PowerPoint plugin, but I don't think that's what you're asking. So hopefully that answered it. How did you include this additional Q&A feature, and then how do you bring it up in the Menti screen? So we have a Q&A question slide that you can add. It's just part of any of the slides that you can add to your slide deck. It's just called Q&A. And in order to bring it up like this, I simply just press here on the bottom right corner. I can press this little icon that has two speaking bubbles, so to say, and then I bring it up like this. I hope that answered it. Or if I missed the question, please feel free to resubmit. All right, I'll take one more question and then I move forward. How to adjust the size of images. Sometimes I would like to adjust and move a picture around the screen. Yes, this is a fine balance between having a lot of customizable options as a user, and also for us to stay actually accessible, making sure that things don't get too complex in our code and making sure that it's always going to be presented in a nice way. So there's a balance here for sure. We do have a few options. When you add an image, you have in the on the right side of the screen, you have a few ways that you can move the picture around, make it smaller, or have it as a background and so forth. But it's pretty set to those options. You can't really do much more than that. And that is because of those reasons that I mentioned. Hope that answered it. All right, I will continue and I will take more questions later on. I do want to highlight the Q&A feature that I just went through. Make sure to encourage your audience, aka your students, if that's your audience at this case, to ask and upvote questions in the Q&A. This makes sure that everyone's voices is heard. They get the chance to clear out any misconceptions, and it promotes a more inclusive discussion in general. So as you've probably seen, you can actually upvote questions inside of the Q&A as well. So even if you haven't asked the question, you can just go to the Q&A, open it up, and then upvote on the question that you think is the most relevant. And it's always the most upvoted question that will pop up first for the presenter. So this also makes sure to answer the most relevant questions first, and make sure that you include as much time as possible for the most relevant questions, not right questions, but the most relevant questions for the group, I would say. All right, I'd like to just add some resources. That was it from the content side from us today. I really want to put up some warm words for our Mentimeter Academy course on inclusive teaching. I've added the link here, and again, you will get all of the slides after the session, and then it will be very easy for you to press on this link as well. It's with my colleague Sylvia, who is very passionate about this topic specifically. And it's a great self-paced course on how to be more inclusive in teaching. So I can highly recommend that one. We also have the help article that Lasse mentioned earlier, how to present with accessibility and inclusivity in mind. I've added that here. I've also added a blog post on inclusive teaching, a few different strategies and examples. Our accessibility statement, if anyone was curious on that, I believe Lasse mentioned it earlier. And I mentioned earlier that we have a feedback and feature request page. So feel free to go in here and type in any feedback or feature request that you may have specifically. I would love to have your feedback on the session today. I will take the remaining questions in the meanwhile, and don't be too stressed if you don't see anything popping in here. I have hidden the responses to live as I learn and not bias you with what everyone else is saying. So feel free to give all of your feedback. I'm also going to add the QR code here to the upper right side again, and we'll take a few more questions. Can we upload PowerPoints already made into Mentimeter? Yes. So either you can import it through the import button. Unfortunately, it will be less accessible that way because then the slides will be imported into Mentimeter as images. But there is the more inclusive way of using our plugin, or not the plugin, but the integration that you find at the bottom of all of the slides when you add a new slide in Mentimeter, as I mentioned before. Are there any plans to offer multilingual questions, possibly as one Mentilink that allows them to select the language option and apply the translation to what they see? Not that I've heard of, but I think it's a very interesting possibility. I know that the team is looking into many different ways that AI can support more accessible solutions and specifically languages. We know that AI is actually quite skilled with languages specifically. So hopefully sometime in the future, but nothing that I've heard of as of yet at least. Feel free to add it to our feature request, but we will also, of course, save it from this feedback here. So thank you so much for that. All right, I believe that was all the questions for today. Unless there's someone else still typing. Thank you for adding your feedback, and that was it for today. thank you so much, and I hope it was useful. You will get all of the slides, as I mentioned a few times, and the recording following this session as well.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.